Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to take a look at how I built an overhead lighting grid on location. We'll talk about some of the challenges of shooting on location, the camera, grip, and lighting gear that I used, my general approach to lighting, how we built the overhead grid, some creative problem-solving techniques, and some key takeaways that you can use on your next shoot. So let's get into it. We shot this at a bar in Hollywood, and one of the hardest parts about shooting in a bar there is not only the size of the place, but because it's an active bar, we weren't able to get in there the night before and do any sort of pre-rigging, and we had to be out of there by 5 o'clock. So we had kind of a hard out. We didn't have a very early call time because we couldn't get into the bar before, I think, 9 o'clock. So that gave us a pretty tight window to get everything built, rigged, and lit. So we had to work really efficiently to get this shoot done on time and on schedule. So for our camera gear, we shot everything on Canon C500 Mark IIs with Canon C&E lenses. I chose the 24-70 for the A camera, which was going to be on a Dana dolly, pushing in and out during the performance. I chose that because of the autofocus capabilities, and I wanted to be able to reframe slightly during some of the songs so I could get a little bit wider and a little bit tighter, all in one setup while doing pull-ins and push-outs. So having the autofocus ability on that lens was fantastic because it really helped me to just focus on the operating and moving the dolly in and out as I was, on a Dana dolly. So for our grip and lighting gear, I knew this was going to be, a fairly grip heavy job because of the need to build kind of this overhead lighting grid. So let's take a look at our grip and lighting list on the screen here. We have cribbing, safety chains, split C-clamps, various lengths of speed rail in 3-foot, 4-foot, and 5-foot segments. That'll all come into play later. We had various speed rail connectors like over-under connectors and junior and baby pipe clamps. We of course had C-stands for our lights and flags. We had our 2 Dana dollies. We had an 8-foot track and a 4-foot track for that. We had combo stands for some of our other lights, a 4x4 Ultra Bounce floppy, 2 4x4 solid floppies. So in our lighting department, we had an Aperture 1200D, 2 LightMatte 4 pluses, 2 DOP Choice LightMatte snap grids to help control spill. We had an Aperture 120D with a 36-degree spotlight, 2 Aperture 300Xs, 1 Aperture Nova with a snap grid, and then we also had 2 6x6 frames of diffusion, which were Unbleached Muslin and Magic Cloth. So let's get into the location scouting for this bar. I had shot there a couple of times before, and the crew had shot there for a number of episodes in the past. So everyone was pretty familiar with the layout and, had best practices for where to stage gear and, just how much room we would actually take up. Looking at it online here, you can see it looks pretty spacious, but when you have 5 cameras in there plus crew, and you have to have staging for hair and makeup and sound, and also lighting for an interview at the bar segment, your space gets eaten up really quickly. So it's really important to have that sort of stuff planned out as far as where you're going to stage your gear. Being able to do that and figure that out on a location scout will really save you, when it comes to production, so you're not wondering, oh, where can I fit this or that. One of the biggest challenges with this location is the fact that the stage doesn't have any sort of overhead grid or any way to rig lighting, above the stage. And we have this chandelier that is in the middle of the stage that can't be removed. So we've got to work around that and figure out a way to get our lights pretty much where that chandelier is. So we had to get pretty creative as far as where we can place our lights and how to build our overhead grid, knowing that I wanted to kind of have a backlight approach and top light approach for this performance. So after I scouted the location in prep, I went back and built it out in Set-A-Light, which is a 3D sort of Pre-Vis lighting program. What I love about Set-A-Light is that it is very photo accurate. So your output is pretty consistent with what it would be in the real world. So I was able to input, our camera sensor and camera size, lens sizes, and camera positions to create a pretty accurate representation of what we would be shooting. So here, let's take a look at the, Pre-Vis frames versus their final frame output. And you can see they really kind of match up pretty well. For our main A camera angle, this was our 24-70 on a Dana dolly. You can see we have our spotlight in the background. We've got a nice soft key light. Doing this kind of work in prep, finding shot size and everything beforehand is really helpful to figure out where cameras are going to go and just how much space we would need to work with where our camera placement is. Knowing we had 5 cameras, I needed to create 5 different camera angles in Pre-Vis as well. So you can take a look here. We have the B camera. This was a tight angle. We wanted to have a pretty tight profile shot. And this was on a 135 cropped in Super 35 mode on the sensor. So we're getting a little bit closer to a 150 millimeter sort of lens on that, which worked out really well. We wanted to have that kind of tighter profile, but knowing our limitations on space and where we needed to place that camera, we needed to be able to crop in a little bit to get that size of shot without necessarily having a longer focal length than a 135 in the set. Here we have our C camera. That's an 85 millimeter on a Dana dolly, and this was sort of what we came up with in prep with the Pre-Vis. We wanted to have this sort of 3/4 profile angle that's sliding back and forth left to right on him during the performance. For our D camera, this was a 50 millimeter. Again, everything's at a 2.8. This shot was to get a medium shot on him singing as well as kind of a full medium shot on the guitar while he's performing. And our last wild card here is the E camera, which initially I wanted to be a 35 millimeter, wide angle lens to see more of the space and see the environment that he's performing in a little bit more from a profile. Sort of like a point of view of an audience member that might be, at the side of the stage. But on the day, it just looked a little bit too wide and felt a little bit too empty. So we ended up shooting that on longer lens. I'm not entirely sure which lens we ended up going with. We may have swapped some of these around on the day. I think this one may have been the 85 actually, and our side to side, our profile here might have been the 50. But yeah, either way, it's a good lesson in being flexible, to changing your plan on the day with prep, because not everything's going to line up as you have in your mind's eye, and sometimes you have to be able and willing to change your ideas that you had in prep when they're not working. This shot ended up working a lot better because we were able to get a nice close-up on the hands playing the guitar and see some more details of that element of the performance. Another great thing about this software is that you can export lighting diagrams. So I was able to give those diagrams to the crew early on, so they would know roughly where camera placement and some of the lighting placement was on the day, which really helped us work efficiently to work within that tight schedule that we had to shoot in at the bar. So I knew that I wanted my lighting to be a broad, soft key light with kind of a soft, toppy backlight overhead and some kind of warmer stage accent as a room light. And we wanted to have a spotlight on the curtains in the background to separate our subject from the background, as well as create a little bit of depth and texture in the background. My initial plan was to light through an 8x8 frame of diffusion, but once we got there on location and I had done the scout and seen just how much space things were going to take up, I needed to go with a little bit smaller of a frame, so I went with 6x6 diffusions instead. Initially, I wanted to have the key light through a 6x6 of unbleached muslin, and we tried that out and it looked great. It provided a nice warmth to the light. The issue became that the diffusion was too thick. The unbleached muslin absorbed too much light and we weren't able to get as much output out of that 1200D as we needed, given our distance. So then we switched over to our 6x6 magic cloth frame, and the output was much brighter. However, it was a little bit too harsh, a little bit too specular, and we needed to get our light further away. But due to our space constraints, we weren't able to move our lighting fixture back at all as we were running into where our sound mixer was staged and some of our other gear. So what I ended up doing was there was a mirror on the wall built in at the location. So what I did was I panned the 1200D into that mirror and shot that through the 6x6 magic cloth. That created a really pleasing book light, which helped soften the light because now the light from that fixture was actually further away due to the mirror. So that was something, I had noticed on the location scout, and having our light there for our key light worked out really great because we were able to use that mirror that was built in, as sort of a CRLS kind of light bridge reflector system that just kind of came with the location. So that was a fantastic solution to wanting to have the light be a little bit softer in quality. After we had panned the 1200D into the mirror, we added a 4x4 Ultra Bounce floppy to the other side to help kind of boost the level of the light passing through that magic cloth. That also helped to block any spill on the rest of the set. So for our backlight, we took a C-clamp and attached it to an I-beam that was in the back of the stage and mounted a 300X on that with a 26-degree spotlight. So after the key and backlight were in place, it was time to tackle the most complicated part, which was creating our overhead lighting grid. One of the things that we needed to keep in mind was making sure we didn't damage the beam at the location. And we used cribbing to clamp our speed rail to the beam so that it didn't damage it. So when we set up our overhead rig, we used 2 4-foot lengths of speed rail, 2 3-foot lengths of speed rail for attaching the split C clamps, and 2 5-foot speed rails to mount our light mat and 120D respectively. We began by building the rig on the ground, making sure that all the split C clamps and over-under connectors and pipe clamp pieces were connected and oriented correctly. Once we got all 5 of the cameras in place and all of our lights dialed in, it quickly became apparent just how helpful it was to have created this lighting grid overhead. It allowed us to not only fine-tune our lighting with a little bit more precision, but it kept stands out of the way of the operators and the performer. Whenever I can, I try and keep as much gear, out of sight and out of the way of the performer, whether that's an actor or an interview subject. The less distractions they have, the better. So creating an overhead lighting grid was extremely helpful in being able to precisely fine-tune our lighting and really helped me get the look that I was going for and create it in our Pre-Vis stills. The big takeaway here is to be flexible and be open to new ideas and come up with creative solutions to get the look that you're going for. If you need to build a grid on location, now you know how to do it. All right, guys, that does it for today's video. I hope that it was informative and that you learned something. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Please give the video a like, it really helps us out, and subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be doing more of this kind of content coming up, breaking down more of my projects that I've shot. So if you like this sort of stuff and you want to learn more about cinematography, give this channel a follow and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next one.